Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Salebox for the 26th of December 2012. My name is TotalBiscuit, rounding up your daily Steam deals. And we're also going to talk about yesterday's Steam deals, since they're still running for a while. Obviously, yesterday was Christmas Day, so I wasn't going to work then, but I can give you a little bit of a roundup on that as well. In fact, it's probably best that we stick with that. So by the time this video goes up, there'll probably be about 15 hours left on these deals, so you do have some time. And then we'll be heading on over to the current deals for the day, which will of course last for 2 days, and we'll be getting regular deals every day regardless. So let's start off with yesterday's deals, shall we, and go through them, and then we'll get on to today's. So we're going to kick it off here with Magic the Gathering, 75% off, takes it down to $5, €4.49, and £3.49. So there are two sets of games here. There's 2012 Gold, and then there's 2013. So I would put different recommendations on each of these. If you're only interested in playing single player, then personally I would go with the Magic 2012 Gold Game Bundle, which comes with the 3 deck packs plus the expansion and the original game. And that will set you back the price that I just quoted you. And honestly, gameplay-wise, it's Magic the Gathering. It's going to be pretty much the same regardless. If you're looking to get into Magic, then 2012 is not a bad way of doing it by any stretch of the imagination. And it's got a good amount of content in it, although not quite as much as the new 2013. However, as a result of the price of the Gold Game Pack, it's quite clearly the better value deal if you're looking to try out Magic the Gathering for the first time, or if you happen to be a previous player of the card game that's just looking for a more laid-back experience. And honestly, it's just the same as the regular card game. There's not really a lot to explain about it. It is a card game, one-on-one for the most part, and well, it's Magic the Gathering. What else can be said for it? If you're looking to play multiplayer, then the majority of the player base has moved over to 2013, which is the new edition. And that's going to set you back the same price as Gold, but if you want to get the expansion and the deck packs, you're going to have to pay a bit extra. So it is a more expensive offering, certainly. The question is it worthwhile? Well, one way or the other, it's a game where you don't really get to make your own decks. You can customize them to some degree by unlocking cards, but the decks are pretty much preset. It's a mostly balanced experience that is pretty good for those just wanting to play some casual Magic every now and again. If you're into Magic and you're into the card game, then you'll probably hate it because the deck building aspect is almost entirely removed. One way or the other, they're both pretty good. There's a little bit too much downtime in both of these games because if you're playing against the opponent, there's some unnecessary animations and turn times that really take longer than they should. But aside from that, it's a good interpretation, and it's really ideal if you're looking to learn the game in the first place. Hotline Miami, 50% off, taking it down to $5, €4.23, and £3.49. So some would argue that this is actually a shooter. I'd say it's more of a puzzle game, because it's a shooting game where you die instantly from pretty much anything. So the idea is you've got to figure out the best way of taking out everybody in the building and accomplishing your objective without dying. And if, of course, you get shot or hit in any respect, you have to start the whole level again. So, it is a tricky game, to say the least. Very, very difficult, very tense, a lot of planning involved, and, of course, a series of well-executed tight motions in order to actually succeed. Long story short, it's pretty damn good in that regard. Very, very tense and very interesting style, to say the least. It's very Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. The soundtrack and even the visuals tend to indicate that kind of bad acid trip stuff going on there. And it's done in an 8-bit style, and it's got this really seasick-inducing wavy style to it, where you move around, the camera sort of sways from side to side. I absolutely hate that. That's my biggest peeve with the game. Everything else about the game is really fun. High octane, high adrenaline, very, very challenging indeed. But it does run into the problem that it makes me nauseous after about 15 minutes. This may be an issue that affects some people, probably not all, and this is considered by many people to be one of the best indie games this year. I'm not going to argue with them. Hotline Miami is getting a sequel, thankfully, due to its success, and I would strongly recommend that you investigate it if you are okay with the 8-bit stylings and you're looking for something very tenser, something of a hardcore top-down shooter, a little bit GTA-inspired, very, very gory indeed, but extremely stylized. Deadlight, 50% off, taking it down to $7.49, €5.99 and £4.99. This is a side-scrolling 2.5D zombie action game whereby you must platform your way around the place and occasionally fight zombies. It really is kind of that simple. The most striking thing about it, I would say, would be the graphics style. It's a pretty good-looking game, honestly. It very much uses the idea of silhouettes, and as a result, the majority of the characters that you'll see on the screen will be very much dark. The platforming was actually pretty enjoyable. The keyboard and mouse controls are reasonable. They're not great. I would still recommend it with a pad, honestly, more so than anything else. And visually, it's pretty stunning. The story's not too bad either, as long as you pay attention to the diaries that are scattered around the place. But I wasn't really a huge fan of the game outside of the really nice-looking visuals. I felt that, honestly, it's not really the kind of game that I personally would enjoy too much. A little bit too much platforming. The action's really not all that entertaining. In fact, to be honest, there's really not all that much of it. It is more of a survival and platforming game than anything else. It does give me this nice flashback vibe, which is, of course, a little bit nostalgic, and also the older Prince of Persia titles. But the 2.5D graphics do cause it some problems from time to time, mostly as a result of jumping onto something that you think is a solid platform and actually isn't, simply because of perspective tricks, and the graphic style certainly doesn't help out all that much there. But there are options that you can enable which will help you determine what's a solid surface and what isn't. So it's a fairly short game, only lasts for a few hours, but it's a pretty enjoyable platforming experience if that's the kind of thing you're into. If you're looking for more of a zombie action game as opposed to a platforming survival horror, then you're definitely in the wrong place. The Batman franchise, 75% off, taking it down to $7.49 for Arkham City, that's $5 for Arkham Asylum, €7.49 and $4.99 respectively, and £4.99 and £2.49 respectively. Well, honestly, for that price, it's really hard not to recommend Asylum, because Asylum is nothing short of bloody phenomenal. Really, really good game. Easily the best superhero game of all time as far as I'm concerned. You can talk about Spider-Man 2 all you damn well please, but quite frankly, I think that Arkham Asylum absolutely trounces it. Really, really awesome game. It does get the Batman vibe very nicely, as a result of being an interesting mix of puzzle solving and investigation, platforming, stealth, and brawling. All of these features are nicely implemented and do very much give you that Batman power fantasy without turning you into an invincible superhero. You are pretty vulnerable, especially against anyone that happens to have guns. There's a lot of content in this game as well. It comes along with additional challenge maps, since it is the Game of the Year edition, and it also gives you access to some nice little meta mini-games inside, including stuff like the Riddler challenges and all sorts of things like that. It's a fantastic game. There's no real doubt about that. Do beware, however, it uses Securom DRM, which means that that's a full machine activation limit. So if you happen to be activating on a lot of different machines for whatever reason, then just do be a little bit careful with that. I hate the Securom DRM. Also beware that unless something changed very recently, Arkham Asylum and Arkham City require games for Windows Live, which means that you might run into problems, especially if you happen to be from a country that doesn't support games for Windows Live. That's very unfortunate, and it's just an additional layer of DRM that you don't really want. In fact, if you buy it on Steam, you've essentially got 3 layers of DRM. Enjoy Securom, games for Windows Live, and Steam. Great. Yeah, that's bloody wonderful. However, the games are, in my opinion, good enough to justify it, especially when they're on sale, and Arkham City's pretty good too. Some would argue that Arkham Asylum is a better game. It's certainly a more structured game, it's a more directed game. Arkham City's more of an open world style, so I would say the narrative isn't quite as strong. However, the combat is much improved, and the ability to fly around an open world doing side missions and all sorts of things like that is, to some people, more compelling than doing the more linear, structured, almost kind of Metroidvania-ish affair. I'd say more of a Bioshock affair, honestly. Let's not even use the Metroidvania term. The idea being that you have to go back to some sections, there's some backtracking involved, and you explore this area. But yeah, Arkham City is more of an open world experience, and it is the Game of the Year edition as well, which means that it is packed full of a bunch of DLC. So both games are really, really good. If you haven't played them and you can only pick one, then I would say pick Asylum over City. simply because the narrative and the actual level design is really good. As regards to the combat difficulty, it's not actually all that difficult a game, and the combat engine really isn't designed for difficult combat, and if you put it on hard, then you're probably going to get frustrated because you don't get any of the warnings whatsoever that someone's taking a swing at you, but one way or the other, they're both really, really fun and excellent, and I do mean excellent Batman experiences. Alright, so let's move on, shall we? We're going to have a little look at Castle Crashers, 66% off. Takes it down to $5, €4, 7 pence, and £3.39. Now, this is a pretty old game, honestly. It's been out on Xbox Live for a number of years now. It has now been brought to the PC. The DLC is not discounted, although bear in mind that both of these DLC are actually for charity. So you can pick these up and the donations go to charity there as well. You can also pick up a 4-pack. As regards to what it is, well, it's a brawler, kind of in the style of Streets of Rage, Golden Axe, Final Fight, that kind of thing. And as a result, you will have the most fun with friends, I feel. Playing it single player is probably not the best of ideas. It really isn't super fun that way and can get extremely repetitive. What it does have going for it, however, is an interesting sense of humor, plenty of replayability as a result of a lot of unlockable characters, and some very funky music as well as a great graphic style indeed. It's by the Behemoth that brought you Alien Hominid and are working on a couple of other games as we speak. And as far as I'm concerned, if you have a bunch of friends to play this with, then it's definitely worthwhile. If you're looking for solo play, then you might want to give this one a miss. And finally, on the list of games from yesterday, we're looking at the Amazing Spiderman, 50% off, takes it down to $25, €14.99, £12.49. Pretty good deal for the Europeans, actually, in comparison to the US price. So this game is alright. At least that's my experience of it so far. The critical response to this game is pretty mixed, especially since there seems to be a gigantic nostalgic hard-on for Spider-Man 2. Now, I don't honestly blame people for that, because it was a good game at the time. So what this is, in my opinion, a fairly pale interpretation of what Batman Arkham City is. It's an open-world 3D Spider-Man game where you swing around the place doing kind of little petty side missions here and there in the city, and then most of the missions are confined to indoors, which is somewhat less interesting. It's a mixture of combat and stealth mechanics, just like Arkham City. It has upgrades, just like Arkham City. The combat system is very similar to Arkham City, but it's just not as good in any way, shape, or form. So, honestly, it would be hard to recommend it even on that basis alone, because the current price is like 4 times that of Arkham City. But the game itself, from what I've played thus far, is alright. It does have a few problems here and there, like the ability to web swing on essentially nothing. The fact that the web swinging mechanics are very, very boring. They just involve holding down a button, whereas in Spider-Man 2 you actually had to kind of aim and time things correctly to properly swing. So that does seem a little bit dumbed down. It's got this really, really huge, awesome city and not enough to do in it, which is a bit of a problem as well. And as I said, the combat is somewhat uninspiring. The stealth is okay when it works. And I'm also happy to report the PC port is actually good. That's something that really surprised me, considering lately Activision games have not exactly been great on PC, but yeah, this worked out pretty well. However, for the price, it's really hard to strongly recommend it, especially when you've got Arkham City just sitting there saying, hey, buy me, or Arkham Asylum, or anything along those lines. It's not a bad superhero game, but it's definitely not a great one either. Alright, so let's move on to today's deals and see what's going on with that. We're going to start off with the Sims 3 collection. I say collection loosely. 66% off for the most part across the board, with a couple of the items being 50%. Takes the base game down to $10.19, €15.29, what? And £10.19. So, Europeans, I hope you enjoy getting ripped off when it comes to The Sims, because boy, do we have a deal for you. The Sims, man. A very, very popular series that I can certainly see the appeal of. I played both Sims 1 and 2, never really bothered with 3. And, like, for a couple of days, it's pretty engrossing, because, honestly, I like people management, I like property management stuff, I like SimCity, and The Sims has got just enough of that element in it to actually make it interesting. And then once I've built my dream house and everyone's doing what they want to do, I kind of get bored of it. So I don't necessarily understand the people that are able to play this bloody game for years and years. Plus, it's also fairly infamous for having a lot of expansion packs, and Sims 3 is no exception. You can buy, if you wish, the total downloadable content pack, which I might add does not include Sims 3 Medieval, which is arguably the best of the whole whole freaking lot for $155.45. Yeah, that seems totally reasonable. I mean, God, Katy Perry Sweet Treats costs $6.79. Are you kidding me? Katy Perry inspired candy stuff for your game. I mean, just no. I mean, seriously, just no. If you want to know what the genuine expansion packs are, it's Showtime, Supernatural, Seasons, Pets, Generations, World Adventures, Ambitions, and Late Night. And everything else is junk. Honestly, of the dabbling I've done, which is not really all that much, I know I have Sims 3 and a couple of other things. I'm pretty sure I've played them for an hour or something. My impression was Medieval was probably the most interesting because, you know, it's a little bit more than just build a house and stuff. You go on quests and level up and crazy stuff like that. That is also on sale, by the way. It's just not listed under Sims 3 for some stupid reason. So, if anything, you might want to be having a look at that one. But honestly, as I said, it's so not me, I guess. And I've never really been able to stick with the game for all that long. A quick bit of information, this may have changed by the time this video comes out, but the Australians are looking at being able to get Sims Medieval for like $2 Australian $50. This is weird. It seems like a pricing error, but at the time of recording, it's actually still there. So I would strongly suggest that you look at that one, because as I said, Medieval seems to be the best of the bunch. Natural Selection 2, 60% off, takes it down to $10, €9.19, and £7.59. This is an asymmetrical first-person shooter / RTS hybrid, whereby you have a team of aliens and a team of humans, and you go and kick the crap out of each other while building across the map. So, similar to Nuclear Dawn and Savage, and of course the original mod Natural Selection, you have a commander. This time you have a commander on both sides rather than just one. They construct buildings, do research for you, order you around. Everyone else is essentially playing in first person and is doing a kind of humans versus aliens fight. And it is actually phenomenal. It's a really, really good team-based multiplayer experience with a very active community and plenty of servers to play on. It can be a little bit challenging to learn, and it does require a reasonable amount of dedication to actually learning what's going on. If you have a good commander, you don't really have to do a lot of learning because he's just going to order you around anyway. You just follow what he asks you to do. But I would recommend going on one of the newbie-friendly servers in order to learn the ropes. There are commanders there that, generally speaking, will tell you how to do stuff and give you an idea as to what the objectives are, because it can be a little bit obtuse at times. But it's a really enjoyable team experience. It is. If you've got a coordinated team and a good commander, it's incredible. It's absolutely worthy of your time, and for that price, it's definitely worthy of your attention. And I would suggest that you have a look at it. You can get a 4-pack if you want to split it with friends, and that's going to save you quite a bit because that is 4 copies for the price of 3 and also stacks with the discount. Spec Ops The Line, 66% off, taking it down to $10.19, €6.79. Good price for the Europeans there, and £6.79. This is a third-person shooter. It is loosely based on the novel Heart of Darkness, and it is, at least from the start, pretty generic. Like, in terms of its combat, it's a pretty uninspired third-person shooter, and with good reason. That's actually what they were looking for. They deliberately designed a fairly generic game, and the strength of the game is in the story and the character development, which is not fun. Like, let me put this out there. This is not a fun game. This is a game that is going to make you think. It's a game that's going to make you feel in ways that, quite frankly, are uncomfortable. Because a lot of the stuff you're going to be doing in that game, and all of the horrible situations that are put in front of you, are genuinely disturbing at times. There's some really nasty imagery in that game. The whole point of the game was to make a commentary on the horrors of war and on the fairly jingoistic nature of a lot of third-person and first-person MMS shooters these days. And they succeeded in doing that. Unfortunately, it does mean that they sacrificed it being a really good game. It is not a really good game. It's a really good story with mediocre game mechanics at best. The PC port is okay, but not great. There are some mouse acceleration issues and various things that you can go and check out over at PCGamingWiki.com that happens to have some interesting fixes for that. But I would say it's a game you have to experience at some point. Don't go into it thinking it's going to be a fun time, because it isn't. It's actually kind of stressful in many ways. And it's not an exceptional game either. The multiplayer is just kind of a mess. It's really not that great and completely tacked on. Even the devs said, we didn't want multiplayer to begin with. But it's one of the strongest stories I've seen in a third or first person shooter in a very long time. And as a result, for that price, it's certainly worthy of your attention. Legend of Grimrock, 75% off, taking it down to $3.74, €3.49 in Tier 1, $2.74 in Tier 2, and £2.99. Alright, so the reason that I wouldn't recommend buying this on Steam is that you can get it as part of the Humble Indie Bundle that's currently running right now. Now, that means you will pay a little bit extra. You have to pay more than the average of $6.41 in order to get it, but you do get Dungeon Defenders with all the DLC, Snapshot, Binding of Isaac, Closure, Shank 2, and Indie Game the Movie in that pack, which in my opinion makes that more than worthwhile. You also get a bunch of soundtracks, and it would not surprise me if they added an extra game later down the line, as Humble Indie Bundle have a tendency to do. So, if there is nothing else in that Humble collection that you want or need, sure, no problem at all, because you will be able to grab it on Steam cheaper. Otherwise, get it as part of the bundle. What is it? It is a classic dungeon crawler in the style of games like Dungeon Master. That means you're in a first-person perspective. That means you've got a party of 4, you arrange their formation, and you fight and solve a lot of puzzles. There are a lot of puzzles in this game, which personally was the point that put me off the most. That's not what I was actually looking for. I was looking for more RPG development, more combat. In fact, there's an awful lot of puzzles to actually get to the next area. However, there is a level editor now out for this game, so it's very possible indeed that we might be getting a whole lot more levels that are more action or dungeon crawly kind of orientated, as opposed to the emphasis on puzzle solving. Really nice looking game though, very well crafted, and excellent graphics across the board, as well as very tense and intriguing combat. ARMA 2, 50% off, taking it down to $15. €12.49 and £12.49. What is this all about? Well, it is a milsim, a military simulator. Very much a first-person shooter with some vehicle elements in it. And it is designed around the idea that you will take part in some pretty authentic and realistic military operations. That means it's pretty much multiplayer focused, and that is, of course, where the community lies. They are all about big milsims. They're all about role-playing and being pretty serious, although there's plenty of comedy moments to be had. A ton of content available here, especially if you happen to be looking for something more realistic. Certainly not an easy game to get into by any stretch of the imagination, but I do, of course, have to address the elephant in the room, which is DayZ. So DayZ is the mod that made this game really, really popular. There is a standalone version that is scheduled to come out at the end of January. So on that basis, if you're looking to just buy this for DayZ, then you're probably best holding off. Wait for the standalone, chances are it's going to be an awful lot better. However, if you're looking for milsim, if you're looking for a game that has an awful lot of modding and an interesting community, to say the least, and you're looking to get immersed in something a little bit more complicated than normal, then ARMA 2 is a really, really good bet. I would imagine that after DayZ standalone comes out, though, you'll probably find this falling way, way lower in price. In fact, since DayZ, the mod, was available, the average price of this game has actually been higher than it was previously. So it may very well be worth avoiding there on that basis, because the chances are in a month or so it's going to be a lot cheaper. But again, if you're looking for DayZ, then do wait for the standalone at the end of the month. And finally, The Walking Dead, 50% off for the entire season, takes it down to $12.49, €12.49, or £10.49. The best way to describe this would be a zombie-filled version of Heavy Rain, or Fahrenheit, or Indigo Prophecy. That's very similar to the way the gameplay is. There's a lot of quick-time event stuff in there. There's a lot of kind of walking around the place doing investigation, a lot of conversations as well. So you've got kind of a Mass Effect-ish or Alpha Protocol-ish conversation system where stuff actually makes a great deal of difference. Not quite as good as Alpha Protocol in that regard, but you are able to make some fairly significant choices, and it tells a really, really good story. It's a pretty emotional story. It's all about distrust amongst survivors and some interesting character development. The entire season is 5 episodes worth, so that's a good amount of content, and many people are calling this the game of the year, and they may very well not be wrong on that one. In terms of telling a story, it's very difficult to find a game that's done it better. in my experience with it, I had a reasonable amount of fun, at least in the first episode. I honestly didn't pursue it after that. I need to make some time to sit down and actually play the whole thing through. This very much seems like the kind of thing that you should sit down and play it over the course of a day and a half or whatever, and really get into the story and understand exactly what's going on. It has been criticized for giving something of an illusion of choice, and there not being a huge amount of consequences to a lot of your actions, at least in terms of how the game ends, but it is critically acclaimed and highly popular for a very, very good reason, and it might be something that you want to look into if you're a fan of adventures. It doesn't have a huge amount of traditional point-and-click in it. As I said, it's more QTE and occasional find-the-object gameplay that's going on there, as well as that built-in conversation system. But it is one of the most popular titles that Telltale has ever put out, and it is critically acclaimed for a very good reason. So do by all means have a look at it and see whether or not you think it is worthy of your time. Alright folks, that pretty much wraps it up for the day. Thank you very much for watching the Salebox, and I shall see you next time.